I guess let's start. So I'm going to talk about Docker. So you've probably heard that this is a container platform that allows you to set up your deployments easier and sort of faster. So in general, what Docker can do is you can specify your project in chunks. So basically you'll have specific parts of your application responsible for different, let's say, operations. For example, you'll have your SQL server, right? You don't want to set it up on your final destination deployment platform on your servers, for example, by hand, because that could be out of sync, right, from your development platform on your Windows machine, like on your local computer. So Docker can allow you to develop your application by connecting these sort of images and containers. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So Docker can allow you to set up your project to work with different parts like so. Docker will be sort of instantiating a session where it will be running several containers. One, for example, will be running your database. The other one will run your application logic, for example, let's say data access models or whatever. And the other one will be, for example, your website, just static data representation. And what's fascinating about Docker is that unlike virtual machines that are usually taking more resources from your target platform for host machine, it will not run the entire operating system on that sort of virtual machine. It will run a really minimized version of your target system with core libraries on it. So with this, it will be way smaller, and the plus side, the host OS, where your application will run, will be, well, Docker will run in a nearly native speed. So there will be no virtualization of sort of function kind of speed monitoring. It's hard to explain, but basically containers from Docker allow you to run programs way faster. So I have watched a few examples, and I did have an example working on my machine where I could basically set up my entire development environment using Docker images. So, for example, in normal case, you would have your database set up on your local machine. Then you would install a sort of compiler for your code, like Node.js to run your images, or Visual Studio to compile your C# code, and then you would have something else. Of course, on every platform, you would have to basically install these applications separately and basically waste a lot of time for your developers, for every developer, for let's say a day or 2 days just for setting up. And then not only developer will be wasting time, but also your administrators and so on. But if you set up your environment with Docker, pull a ready image of your database, for example, from repository, I will talk about this later, and then connect sort of build environment, which could be a Docker container as well, and other parts, then your development platform can be set up in just several minutes. So yeah, like I mentioned here, basically, if Docker is set up correctly, then you can remove the works on my machine cases, which means if you develop on a platform which is, let's say, 98% similar to what you will have on your target host, your server, then there will be little additional configuration needed to deploy your application. It will just run. And yeah, as for hosting, Docker is supported by major hosting platforms. You can see that on screen. It's Amazon, Microsoft Azure, DigitalOcean, Exascale, whatever that is, Google Compute Engine, OpenStack, Rackspace, and virtual machines.
So Azure also support?
Yes. And virtual machines, it's kind of fascinating. You can set up your local sort of clusters on your machine and just see how well it will work on different kind of... You can simulate your app working in the cloud, basically. So different chunks of your application can run on different sort of servers, and they can communicate with each other with Docker's help, and you can just see how it all works. So just to mention a few users in the world who is using Docker, it's BBC, eBay, Expedia, General Electric, Lyft, New York Times, PayPal, Spotify, Uber, Splunk, and we also use it in Diatom for Clizy project. So
yes, you put the Clizy as well.
Yeah. So what I wanted to mention that those images that you can have in your applications are pretty much in public domain. For example, if you want to have your application work with Node environment, you can find it basically on hubdocker.com. You just search for Node, and you will see a bunch of sort of repositories where your basic images will be. So we used in that Clizy project official Node supported image. We used 4.9. I don't see it's here, but it is in there somewhere in the repository. Also, recently I started learning .NET Core, so there's even .NET Core image somewhere. So there is a Microsoft .NET images. So basically you can Dockerize your .NET and the .NET Core applications and have them run in this environment. So just to demonstrate how this kind of works, I built a simple application. It runs currently on my on my local machine. It's nothing much. It's just a React-based application. It's run inside Docker containers, and I easily added MongoDB for a database. So I just wanted to test if Mongo would be easy and fast to set up, because I don't have it on my machine here on Mac. And frankly, all I had to do was, let me show you this. So right now you see a standard YAML file that you would use to compose several Docker images so that they would be built in one environment, and you would use them synchronously. So for my case, in services section in the configuration, I just basically showed I want to use a standard Mongo image, and my application would be this Node part I'm telling my application to build its own container from local folder, and it will use a specific Docker file which is in the same directory in here. It will be called like this, Diatom node tests, container name will be called like this, and my application is a simple node application, and it uses 8085 port. So for Docker, I told it to expose just that 8085. It is possible to map your ports in Docker. For example, if my application was running on port 8080, I would write 8080 here and point it to something else. Docker would handle that automatically. I failed to demonstrate that thing here for you guys, but it is possible to tell Docker to build your application kind of on demand. So if you have something on your local machine, on local drive, it would automatically kind of copy your code into your Docker container, and with several different commands it would just build your code and you would have your app running. So with this you can make your applications, you can build your applications without even worrying about platform where you build it actually. And here I'm just telling, okay, is this node service, it depends on DB service, which is our Mongo. So internally it makes kind of a network connection for these two. So this will kind of work in the same environment, and will be able to use Mongo. This is pretty much the only MongoDB setup I needed, and it could easily be a Microsoft SQL server, Postgres, whatever. As well as for...
Just a question, these services are only, say, Linux-based services. You mentioned Microsoft SQL Server.
Microsoft SQL Server recently was ported to Linux as well,
okay.
So it's possible to just use it. I read somewhere in forums that they didn't actually port it, they just made a special layer to kind of virtualize it. So basically it's still the same Windows application, is just ported to Linux, but it still works.
Like
And
Wine running?
yes, something like that, but they report that it works pretty much the same with the same speed. So yeah, and for my personal application, which I use, I am using this sort of thing here, Docker file. A Docker file is a core for specific application, and in here, well, I'll use this one. It's just telling, okay, from node Wheezy, it's basically the name of image that I want to use for my application. So here is a specific version of node-based image that I want to use. And it will have like a Linux and Node.js and NPM installed on it. So package management is already set up for us with just this one command. Then I'm just exposing a directory which I will be used to store my node-based application, so that my all server files will be pasted in there, and it will be set up as work directory, as you here see. Then I'm just copying a configuration file into specific folder and run node-based scripts here, then copy all my server files in that directory, and I am able to sequentially run applications. So here I am pre-building my node client code so that I could use React on it, and exposing port 8085, and then just running node. That's it. And yeah, that's all I needed to run the code. And yeah, if I didn't mess up the automatic build systems that I had, I could show you that I could go here, for example, change a few lines, and then here it would automatically show me the changes. But well, I'm using this project to test my things for Diatom here. So if you try to check out the code, then you will probably see something different there soon as well. What's fascinating about these configuration files here is that, let me show it again. So if I wanted to deploy my application and I wanted to separate a front-end part on a different sort of servers to minimize the load on main server, I would make several instances of my client-side application. This way I wouldn't actually stress my database server because, well, that's important for speed. And this is a bit different Docker YAML files that I showed before. No, it's not that one, it's this one. So the same, it uses Mongo, it uses an image of the same code that I published to Docker. So yeah, the example before, the node part, all code that I made, I pushed that to public Docker Hub, and I'm able to reuse it like this as well. So you can imagine your core application parts could be used as NuGet packages in Microsoft, for example, right? You can just update your existing application and it will just have the latest code in there. And the same, I'm using the same pattern to combine MongoDB to it. I did use a specific image to proxy my client-side applications, and when I deployed it, I used 3 replicas, so I had 3 instances of my applications running. So whenever I would load my client-side application, it would choose actually from which replica or client to load my client-side application. So so internally there is a load balancer, and it is responsible to navigate you to a more available server to use your application. And that's pretty much it. For load balancer, I exposed port 8085, and it just works automatically, or automagically, as they say it, right? That's pretty much it, and yeah.